Sunday greetings, Fordham folks. So we are now at the end of week 7 and getting pretty near to the end of our class. And I'm conscious that really we're coming back full circle, almost to the starting point. And when I think about what began our inquiry into psychology and religion, it had something to do with this question of whether fear drove us to the religious life or love drew us into it. And both fear and love are registered in our bodies, right? We have this felt sense of fear and we have this felt sense of love, and that's how our brain registers the information. Our bodies really kind of carry the data points. And I think it's safe to say that any life-giving religious practice or tradition has to celebrate the life of the body, right? Central Christian teaching is incarnational theology, this notion that spirit becomes flesh, right? That God takes a human form and has a care for human forms. In their book, Primary Speech, A Psychology of Prayer, Anne and Barry Ulanoff talk about this really requirement that if we're going to talk about our embodied selves, we need to talk about sexuality. And on page 78, the Ulanoffs write, bringing all the sides of our bodily sexuality to God in prayer directs us to one good end, gratitude. We have gratitude for the body we have, a body that we can come to accept despite its imperfections. Our gratitude sometimes opens us still further to discover that our sexuality may be more than we assumed and less than we feared. I think that's a lovely formulation. The idea of being grateful for the bodies we are given because what they are capable of. And sex gives humans an important point of connection, connecting to something other than themselves, someone other than themselves, and something greater than themselves. You know, sex can become a space for the transcendent. In the PowerPoint presentation that you all reviewed, there's an excerpt from Carter Hayward's theological treatise, Touching Our Strength. And she notes that our sense of what is good very often comes to us through our senses, right? What we can taste, what we can hear, what we can see. And the self-care suggestions that I gave you all this week really contain these very concrete suggestions about coming back to our senses, right? Because our human selves need to inhabit our senses. That is part of caring for our existences. So I want to commend you all to your devotion to those body and soul exercises throughout the week. And I think what some of you really expressed in your blogs and in your discussion posts was this deep need we all have to feel things, to have these experiences to incorporate, and also our desire to embody virtues and qualities that matter to us. In the Roman Catholic tradition, obviously, there's a sacramental sensibility, and the sacramental sensibility enacts things, right? So we are fed through the Eucharist. We are soothed by the anointing with oils. It recalls that Psalm 23 about what makes our cup overflow. And in Protestant traditions where there is a practice of faith healing, right, there's this laying on of hands. And what you notice about these experiences and expressions of faith is that they're tactile, right? And in the gospel stories, when Jesus moves through the crowds, what so many in the crowd want to do is to touch Jesus, right? Or to even touch the hem of his garment, because that is what will be healing, and that is what will make people whole. So we have this intrinsic sense that we live by love, and that in the absence of love, we will die. We cannot be sustained. And that is what informs so much of interpersonal neurobiology as it's outlined in Cozzolino's work, right? That, in fact, our natural habitat, as he says, are relationships. And the lack of relatedness or a want for healthy relationships can be very damaging, and in some cases deadly, even sort of lethal. So when he talks about what love accomplishes, right, what love activates in us when we are touched by love, it is in some ways a full body sigh. So Cozzolino writes, "Love is a relief from scanning the outer world for threats and our inner worlds for shame. Love turns off the alarm, cancels our insurance, and frees us from worry. The sight, smell, and touch of our beloved make us glad to be alive." Glad to be alive. We're glad to be alive when we know that we are loved. Then the question becomes, how can love successfully be communicated? Sometimes it's through words, sometimes it's through touch, but it's really both. You know, we understand so much of human relationships through our nonverbal communications, right? Through body language. And it's interesting how body language is in some ways our mother tongue. When you think of mothers holding babies in their left arm so that the baby can hear the heartbeat, that's instinct, right? That's an instinctive gesture. So the both sides of communication matter very much here, that love is successfully communicated to the person, and that the person is able to receive communications of love. And people will pay attention to attitudes as much as words. They will pay attention to physical postures. They will pay attention to their felt sense of how someone engages them. I've been doing talk therapy for, well, more than a dozen years now. And I will say that so much of talk therapy really involves this deep respect for nonverbal communication. And a lot of you in your pastoral work have observed the same. One of you wrote in your post this week about being a pastoral caregiver, often the fewer words exchanged, the better. I think that's a terrific insight. And the fewer words exchanged suggest the economy of really loving communications, right? Loving communications don't need that much explanation. They don't need to really be intellectualized, because they are almost immediately registered through the body, through our whole body selves. So I thank you all for being so reflective in your considerations of those mind, body, spirit connections this week. And that question Cozzolino brought up about nature versus nurture is in some ways a trick question, right? Because everything is both nature and nurture in our human experience. And what Cozzolino is suggesting, and I think is indeed valid, is that a big part of our human nature is this desire and this need to nurture as well as be nurtured. You all did some chanting this week, and I was thinking today of that Tese chant, Ubi caritas et amor Deus ibi est. So that's Latin for where care and love are, there God is also. And when we are aware of our mind-body-spirit connections, and when we are aware of our connections to each other, then we really do invite in a spirit of care, an ethic of love, and we also invite the divine indwelling, right? There God is. As Jung said, bidden or not, God is present. But certainly where there is caritas et amor, God is most welcome. So I look forward to our last week of study together and hearing more from you then. Take care.